Hello, Partho.
Hi,
Welcome to our show,
thank you.
India Education Show. In line of our previous discussions, if you could bring up the role of an educator, a teacher, right? So, who is a good teacher in your view? There's so many, I mean, it's a layered question. The understanding is at various levels. There are the teachers who just would come to a school because they want to spend their day before they have their own domestic obligations. And there is perhaps that passionate educator who's teaching because of this the sheer joy that he or she gets out of teaching. And then there can be an educator who has a more evolutionary perspective on the role that he or she is playing within the education system. So there are multiple
Yeah,
sort of you know perspectives on the answer to this question. But we would love to hear your perspective as to who is a good teacher.
who is a good teacher? From an evolutionary perspective or a
Yes,
utilitarian one?
both.
Both. Well, let's to handle the utilitarian is the easier one. So let's be done with that
Why
first.
not?
So a good teacher in the utilitarian worldview would be one who is himself or herself well informed, has a global understanding of his or her discipline, his or her subject, and has mastered enough of his or her subject to be able to articulate that efficiently, effectively, interestingly, creatively for the learner. So, someone who's able to not just give information, but help the learner to process that information. Because the actual learning, the larger chunk of learning happens in the processing and not in simply receiving the information. And processing is a complex activity. Indeed.
Does this refer to the methods the teacher is
No,
using?
yeah, the processing would involve previous knowledge, knowledge you're receiving, the way you can correlate what you already know and what you're now receiving. When I say what you already know, I'm not talking about just one field of learning. Correlation will involve multiple fields and multiple layers of learning that you have to correlate. And then through a pretty complex correlation, you have to come to a contextualization. And this may be a multi layered contextualization, out of which then you will derive your understanding. And the understanding itself will be multi layered and complex because it won't be a straight line understanding. You will be able to understand this particular knowledge, let's say, in its various applications. So, how you will understand this in A will be different from how you understand the same thing in application B or context C. So, it will differ with contexts and applications. And to be able to do all this simultaneously would be the most effective kind of processing. Now, that is where the real learning happens. The difference between a well informed human being and a human being who really understands and is able to apply according to context and need.
Right.
So, a teacher who can bring the learner from level A, which is, let's say, simply acquiring information, to level B, which is processing information, to level C, which is understanding information in all its different layers and aspects, and level D, which is applying that information after understanding it in the right context, in the right way, the right application, efficiently. Efficient application is very important for what you've learned. When you put all that together, then you have effective learning. So, a teacher who can do that with children
And
would be a
for
good
me,
teacher.
if I am that type of a teacher, or I aspire to be this type of a teacher who has mastered the discipline and is creating the right learning experience for
Right.
my student to the final point where he's able to apply the knowledge that he has gathered, what are the sort of determinants? What type? How do I master my discipline as a teacher?
First and foremost, as a learner, you have to be completely involved with what you're learning, with your subject, with your discipline. You have to be passionately involved. So, learning is always a direct function of how deeply interested you are in it and how deeply involved you're in it. You learn best what you want most to understand and learn.
You learn best what you
You, you,
want most from
you learn
that
best
learning.
what you need most to understand. You learn best what you need most and what you want most to
How
learn
interesting.
and understand.
Right. Right.
So, what do you really need? If I want to learn,
Curiosity is the word, isn't
yeah, I
it?
mean, let's say that. Just to give you a very crude material example, let's say I have some money and I want to invest, and I want to make the most money out of it. So now there is a need and a desire to learn about that field. So now I will plunge into this field of investments and learn everything that I can as efficiently as I can because I have to invest money at the end of the day. So that is where learning really happens. On the other hand, if you were to come to me one day and I'm deeply involved in poetry, and you come and say, you know what, let's talk investment. I want you to invest money. So I will listen to you. I might even show interest, genuine interest, but I won't learn. I will probably leave it to, you do it for me. That's the difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this applies to every field of learning because here I'm talking about investing money, but there I'm talking about investing time, energy, consciousness. So when will I invest time, energy, and consciousness in a particular discipline or field? When I'm really interested in it.
So my question to myself would be, am I really interested in my
Yes.
field?
Yes.
Am I really perpetually curious about the
Yes.
developments in my
Yes.
field?
Because if I'm interested, then I'll be curious.
And that comes down to me being a lifelong learner myself about my
Absolutely.
field.
The best teacher is one who is herself a lifelong learner. Most teachers that I come across have stopped learning years ago. Maybe I have the degree and I'm doing a job, and that's it.
Right.
So if that kind of thing happens, then you're just a dry teacher doing a job. You're not an educator.
So if I have indeed mastered my discipline and I have the right objective in my mind, which is to stimulate the curiosity in my learner, to provide the knowledge, then take him to the point where he or she is able to apply that knowledge. Uh, what do I need to know in terms of pedagogical approaches, right? So I have my discipline, I have the student, I go into the classroom. What type of tools typically I should be aware of how the teaching learning process happens so that I can be more effective in the transmission of knowledge?
Very frankly, Manu, given if I have to use my experience of the last 40 odd years being in education, working with children and teachers and curricula and pedagogies, I would say that I have learned best from teachers who taught what they were teaching because it was their interest, their passion, their vocation, their calling, their everything. They, I mean, I learned physics from a person who lived and breathed physics. He would go to sleep with physics and wake up with physics. He would play the flute and physics would flow out of his music. He would look at the stars and he would see physics happening there. And such a person taught me physics, and I learned physics from him lying on the lawns in my college. Lying down and just looking up at the stars, he explained quantum physics to me like no book has ever done after that. He didn't know any pedagogies. He didn't know any learning style. He was not even an educator. And I find that I have taught best to several students who have come to me through the years. I've taught best when I was living what I was teaching. And I wasn't even perhaps interested in teaching. I was living the subject. This is it, you know. If you have come to me, you've come to whatever subject I'm talking about. There was a time I used to teach literature. And I used to teach physics to students. Then I taught Vedanta to young people, seekers, young seekers. And every time I would be living that, I would be breathing that. From top to bottom, I would be that.
So living
So,
and breathing your subject is the best
yes, I
pedagogical
didn't
approach
need
I
any
can have.
pedagogy after that. I mean, it was just like, and amazingly, as an educator, when I looked critically at what I was doing, I saw that, I would intuitively pick up how you learned best. I mean, I would be talking to three, four people about, let's say, Vedanta or even physics. And I would intuitively know that, this person will respond to visuals. And so I would just describe what I was telling them in visual terms. I would almost draw it for them. And because it's my passion, I live it, I can draw as easily as speak and sing and do anything with it. I
An
can play
intuitive
around with
process
it.
of learning
And
styles.
everyone would pick up. So, as an educator, when I look critically at this whole process, I would find that pedagogies and pedagogical styles and learning philosophies are derivatives of the real process. Teachers need to learn all that when they don't have the real process. When you're not really living it in your
That's
soul,
when you
heart,
need
and
those
mind,
processes a bit more.
then you need all that.
Right, understood. That's absolutely clear.
But if you're living all that, you don't need any of that. It just happens.
Because even when I look back at my schooling years, it wasn't about whether I loved Hindi more or
Yeah.
geography more. It was about this teacher who would come into the classroom and
Yeah.
create this sense of excitement and awe
Exactly.
about the
Yes.
subject.
Yes.
Uh,
Now, wait, two words, very important words you use: excitement, awe, wonderment. These are things that the teacher would create and learning would happen.
and it could be in the most unexpected of the subjects, but the teacher
Absolutely.
is living and breathing it, and it just
Yes.
electrifies you. It just brings you into that
Absolutely. I
subject.
remember my literature teacher in school. He was a great Shakespeare enthusiast. He lived and breathed Shakespeare. And he was teaching us English. Imagine that. And then he would walk into his classroom, and he had those days teachers would smoke in classrooms. Up to years ago. So he used to come with his pipe or his cigar, with that lovely smell around him. He would come in with his pipe, and we would come in like Laurence Olivier walking onto stage. And he would start off with a flourish. He would, and before we knew it, we were caught up with the language, the rhythms, and we learnt English the way no one could teach us English. I mean, we learned how to speak English, how to feel the language, how to feel the sound, the rhythms, the cadences, the intonations, And he didn't teach us any of it. It's just by listening to him and say, wow, the way he's speaking. So that's how you learn. Whichever language it is.
Beautiful. So now, if we just progress further from where we started, uh, the evolutionary perspective as a teacher, before we discuss that, if you could just shed a bit more light about the precise understanding of an evolutionary perspective. When we say evolutionary, what do we really mean?
In one single word, consciousness education.
Okay.
That's evolutionary education. Why? Utilitarian education is teaching you how to cope with the world in the here and now, in the immediate present. So you need to learn certain skills, certain information, need to have a certain academic mastery, and need a certain personality to go with it. So, all that, and you can get a good job and live a good life. That's utilitarian education at its best. End result, you should be able to earn good money out of it, and you should be able to acquire a certain degree of fame in the field. People should listen to you, praise what you're saying, like what you're saying, and money, popularity, That would be the end products of a consumerist utilitarian education.
Right.
Now, evolutionary education has nothing to do with all that. I mean, you may be doing all that, but it's not important. You may earn money, but that's not the point. You may become popular and famous. That too is not the point. What is the point? The point is to grow in consciousness. So you can learn physics in the utilitarian world and pass your exam in physics, probably even do a PhD in physics. But in the evolutionary worldview, you grow in consciousness because of physics. Physics takes you to that worldview where your consciousness expands. Wow, this is the universe I'm living in. This is the universe I can experience. You know, the sheer wonderment and the magic of it all. It's nothing to do with equations and the academics of physics that you learn. This is to do with the physics that you're living, the symphony of science. And, now that will probably also give you a PhD, but that will take you to the Nobel Prize category. You may get a Nobel Prize. And even if you don't, you'll be an original researcher. You'll write books. You will dance the dance of physics the rest of your life. You see the difference.
As someone who's understanding what you're saying, you said the utilitarian sort of journey, make a bit of money, have a bit of fame, and then the
Yes.
consciousness approach, which can take me to a quantum jump in the field of my choosing.
Yes.
If you could just help us
Pun
understand,
intended.
pun intended, uh, consciousness for some of
You-
our listeners who
yes.
may not be even
So
familiar with what do you.
what do I mean by consciousness? So if by studying, and I gave the example of physics, I can give the example of literature, same thing. In the utilitarian perspective, you can do literature, be a good student of literature, have a degree in literature, even perhaps teach literature. But in the evolutionary perspective, you'll become a poet, a literature, a writer. You will live the language. You'll be another Shakespeare, and again, the manner of speaking can be another Kalidas, it can be another Dante. So the language and the literature will flow out of you, and in that you will grow in your content. You're not just doing literature to write a paper and to get a degree in literature. You're studying literature, you're imbibing literature, you're imbibing the very spirit of literature, and you're growing as a human being because of that. And there's no limit to how you can grow as a human being through study of literature or physics or biology or any subject for that matter, mathematics. I know people who have become mystics because of mathematics or physics.
So it is
People who
indeed
have,
possible to cross that threshold that the awareness that we are, the consciousness that we are, gets connected to the field in which we are involved
yes,
in. Is
yes,
that what you're
that
trying
is
to
a
allude to?
threshold that can be crossed. And when you cross that threshold, then whatever field you're talking about, whatever subject or discipline, connects automatically to all subjects and disciplines of learning. How can you learn physics at that depth without learning everything about the universe? How can you learn literature to that depth without understanding and learning everything there is to learn about human life and existence? So every discipline can take you to that depth, and I call it the cosmic depth of learning. You're no longer, writing a paper, getting a degree is far from your mind at that time. You're in a cosmic dimension, and your consciousness grows. That is, I call it consciousness education, this evolutionary education. I call it consciousness education. Education that helps you grow in consciousness. It expands your consciousness, widens it, deepens it, heightens it.
So sounds very enticing and interesting for me if I am a teacher. We started with the question, who is a good teacher? We started with the utilitarian view.
Yes.
Then we are going to the more evolutionary perspective on the matter. Here comes in consciousness, where I can cross the threshold of being merely a utilitarian world teacher
Right.
to someone who's living it, breathing it, and bringing my consciousness to my field. If you could tell us, or tell, let's say, if I am a teacher, how do I become this? Because, we can't assume I'm already this, but the
Yeah.
purpose of our conversation is to open this world to those aspiring teachers who should know that such a possibility exists for them?
Yes, yes. So that's an interesting question. Somewhat difficult to answer because how do you become that kind of a teacher? Because you have to be that kind of a person first. Which means, let's take any example of, let's take literature for instance. So long before you start teaching literature, you have to yourself first get into the spirit of literature. You have to be a lover of literature, an adorer of literature. Literature has to flow with your blood, as it were. As I said, you would be dreaming literature.
Right.
You'd be breathing in literature and breathing out literature. So that kind of a person, when he or she starts interacting with learners, you can imagine the fire that everyone catches from this person. You literally catch fire. It's not a cold, dry thing that's going on that you're standing there and giving a lecture and people are taking notes. No way. This is
Spontaneous
a
combustion.
fiery thing that happens. It's like you've come in contact with the sun almost,
They
and
say
you
teachers are
catch the
candles, no?
fire.
They burn, their job
Yeah,
is to
but
burn
except
other,
that this is not a
light up
candle.
other
This is a
candles.
flaming bonfire. Crackling with the intensity of what you learn and what you know.
So
So anyone in your presence will catch that fire.
so to be that type of a person, I introspect whether I am in touch with the spirit of my chosen discipline or not.
Whether you're that deep into your chosen discipline or not, yes.
Right. Right.
And,
So
and, and no school or university can prepare you for that you are.
this will then take us to a different territory of self-awareness and self-knowledge, and whether to whether to be confident that you're in love with what you have chosen to do,
Yes,
the
yes.
field you have chosen to
Right,
teach, right?
right,
These are deeper
right,
questions pertaining to that.
right.
And whether I am a good teacher or not, I'll have to delve into that category. And if we are, let us say, school managements or recruiters of good teachers, then that is what we should assess in a potential educator, right?
I remember one of the teachers, I have never forgotten, one of my gurus and teachers. I asked her that, are you a teacher of Vedanta? And she just looked at me with a lot of amusement and said, no, I am Vedanta. That's what I'm talking about. She didn't even think of herself as a teacher of Vedanta. She was Vedanta. She had identified completely with Vedanta, with that spirit of Vedanta and the body of knowledge that is Vedanta. So I said that I realized at that time that I'm not in the presence of a teacher of Vedanta, I'm in the presence of Vedanta itself. Imagine
Beautiful.
what that does to a learner.
Right. Have
So
you come across such teachers? Are
I
they far and
have
few between?
far and
Because
few in between, but
as a school, we are a group of 100 educators,
yeah.
right? So how do you make sure that a bulk of the majority is like that? It's not. It sounds like a tall order.
Yes, Manu, and that is the challenge. How to, I mean, I've spent, out of the 40 years I spent in education, I think more than 20 I spent as a teacher educator, as a teacher educator. And that was my challenge, that how to make manner of speaking, yeah, get how to create, perhaps that's a better word, how to create conditions of learning where such teachers will happen. You can't make such teachers. You can't, create such a teacher. You have to create the conditions where such a teacher can happen.
Right.
And mind you, these are not people who are there to become teachers. You can't make this kind of someone who says, I am physics or I am literature. You cannot, you know, educate such a person or train such a person to become a teacher. A person who says, I am literature is not there to teach. He's there or she's there to live literature. Now you have to use that. It's that, almost the uncontrolled fire. You have to use that, channel it in such a way that teaching happens around this person. That is the major challenge of the teacher educator and schools of this kind, what I call evolutionary schools, consciousness schools. They have to create a condition in which A, can attract people like this. And B, attract a person like this and channel this person's raw energies, this person's fire, into channels of learning, teaching. And you bring learners around this person and then let the process happen, let them catch fire. Because this person is fire. So you have to create conditions in which others can come close to this person and catch that fire. Now, that is the evolutionary challenge of education. That's the real challenge.
So let us say I'm a teacher who's been teaching for 10 odd years, and I come across, for example, the kind of discussion we are having, and I have the aspiration to up the game, so to speak, to become the best version of a teacher I possibly can become. But I'm not someone who is already there. But I do love my subject, and I want to grow. I have the aspiration. What would you tell me to do to become this ideal teacher, the landscape of which you are painting?
Well, I wouldn't tell you something. I would probably create conditions for you to spend more time with me. And while you are in my presence, when you're spending time with me, I direct the fire into you. That's how a teacher lights the fire in others. Not by being a teacher, but by creating conditions in which the learner, the student, catches fire. That's what a guru does to a shishya. A guru never teaches a shishya. A guru creates a condition in which the shishya catches fire. If the shishya is meant to catch fire, has the potential to catch fire, not everything catches fire. No? You need good wood for it to catch
Absolutely,
fire.
yes. Yes.
If it's wet wood, it won't catch fire. It may after doing a lot of things with it. And there are some materials that will never catch fire. So first you have to find the right material, that this is something that has the potential to catch fire. You can almost see the sparks in it. A very good teacher or a guru can see the sparks in something that others see as dead wood. Others would see dead wood, and this guru would see the unborn fire in it. And then the guru can create conditions in which this material catches fire.
Understood. So
And that's education of the highest order. We're talking about true evolutionary education here.
if I could just ask you as a parent, again, if my child is going to a school, or if I'm shifting schools, as a parent who's not an educator, how do I identify a teacher like this? How do I get that assurance? Oh, wow, my child, out of X number of teachers, this is the teacher who is this ideal teacher, who's living and breathing his subject. As a parent, will I be able to find that out or know that?
Have you ever appreciated the game of cricket?
Yes, quite frequently.
So when you see a Sachin Tendulkar playing, do you ask such a question?
No.
It's obvious.
We know it is genius
It's
at
patently
play.
obvious. Same. I mean, have you appreciated music? Have you heard Pandit Ravi Shankar playing,
Yes.
and hundreds of other people playing, and then you come to Ravi Shankar playing? Well, you don't ask a question of this kind. You're watching so many actors. Then you see Sir Laurence Olivier playing Hamlet, and you don't ask a question like that.
So when genius is at play,
you will know it. I mean, these you call them a genius, yes. So let's say a genius teacher, he or she will radiate where everything else would be subdued and like just smoldering somewhere, and this being will be radiating. Just being in this person's presence, you will catch it. I mean, I've known people who have nothing to do with the game of cricket, just watching Tendulkar and wanting to be a cricketer. Just listening to a person like Ravi Shankar or Zakir Hussain and saying that, I would love to play music. That suddenly that thing in you is awakened, that I want to play this kind of music. I want to play this kind of cricket. I want to do that kind of acting. I want to write that kind of poem. Suddenly you have that aspiration for greatness, which has nothing to do with marks and degrees or jobs. This is a passion for greatness for the sake of greatness. Something, every human being has this potential for greatness in them. There's a hidden Godhead almost in them. And every human being has that hidden Godhead. It is the potential for absolute greatness, which is hardly ever awakened by our society and by our schools. Till you come in the presence of such a genius, such a guru, such a teacher. And then suddenly that dormant seed of divine greatness in you is suddenly awakened. Boom. You want to be more than what you are. That is evolution.
So, in a student, or if my child goes to school and he comes back with that sense of amazement and wonderment
Yes.
about a particular
Yes.
subject, often when I will find out about the teacher, then that teacher is someone
Yes.
special.
Yes. I used to come home from my school acting out Shakespeare without really knowing Shakespeare so much. Just picked up a few words and I would act like my teacher, walk on the stage as if I was Macbeth, as if I was Hamlet or so. And my parents would look at me and say, "What's wrong with him?" And then they would say, "Where did you learn that from?" So I said, "From my teacher," and I would name him. And then they would make it a point to go to school and meet him and say, "My son imitates you, he's living like that." And my teacher used to say, "Does he speak like me?" He said, "Yes, he's trying to speak like you. He'll get good English sooner or later." That's all he would say. He will pick up good English. Don't worry about it. So yes, you do that. Children do that.
Right.
That's how you get into it. So this is literature, of course. So you can recite. But the same thing can happen with science, with mathematics. That thing gets into you.
Right. Great. So on that note, I think we've figured out today a lot more about how to be a good teacher, and thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.